Welcome to the Healing Collective podcast, where we explore the paradox of healing.
And we broadcast all of the healing codes to support a world of more heart-centered humans.
I'll introduce to the podcast my therapist, Cathy Latner, who I have referenced dozens of times on this podcast. I think she's my somatic experiencing therapist, and she has a lot of other modalities and things that she does as well. But I'm super excited to have Cathy on because, one, she's been hugely impactful in my life and development. And, you know, now we've been working together for quite a while, years. And sometimes she just drops something that she did in her life that I'm like, wait a minute, what? I really want to hear the story of that. Can you please tell me more about that? And there's also some like frameworks and models and ways of thinking of things that you've articulated to me that have been so helpful. So I thought it might be helpful for some of our listeners as well. Anything you'd add, Lauren?
I'm just more thinking about listeners who are less familiar with somatic experiencing therapy, maybe generally think of therapy more in like a talk therapy model, and how much like in our world, somatic therapy just feels like a non-negotiable almost.
Yeah.
So I would be curious to hear either of you, give some context, or both of you, to like listeners about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe telling the story of how I came to meet Cathy might help. I've talked about this a little bit, but basically all kinds of what we call top-down models. So like traditional therapy or coaching or reading books or getting advice from friends, like trying to change how you think about something so that you can change the results of your life. Like I got really far with a lot of that. And then there was some stuff that was just not moving. Like I knew what was happening, I understood it, but I just had really strong responses to some core things. And I learned about somatic experiencing from Kate, one of the other coaches on our team, who's also a therapist. And she gave me a list of names in Massachusetts. And I don't know why she gave me a whole list of names, but I was like, this one, Cathy. And she was kind enough to take me on. And, my journey has been a lot more agency, a lot more choice, and like a different experience around some of those stickier things that my body would just get really overwhelmed. Like I couldn't talk myself out of my body's experience, basically. And so somatic experiencing is supportive. It's called a bottom up. It's like based on the body, bottom up modality. And I don't know, Cathy, maybe you want to say more.
That was excellent. I was like, oh, that was great. Yeah, and I think the top down and the bottom up can coexist and reinforce each other. It's not like one is more helpful than the other. I think that having both is really wonderful. That insight really can help us a lot. And also there are things that are unconscious that our body is holding that insight's not going to get to, because it's more a biological, instinctual response from the autonomic nervous system that's not on the conscious level. And so somatic experiencing helps us track how the body is responding to things that we might not even be conscious of. And so it's really helpful to have someone who's a witness on the outside and say, oh, did you just notice like you flinched when you talked about that? And the person might say, no, I had no idea. And so then we might say, okay, let's put the story aside and just let the body have time to process that startle response. Like, what's happening? What does your body need now to help let that energy move through? We also do a lot of re-scripting, renegotiating of traumatic events, so the body can complete things it might not have had the opportunity to do, defensive responses to keep us safe, that might be sort of frozen in the nervous system because our body was in a freeze response because we were in overwhelm. So our body couldn't respond and complete whatever movement it might have wanted to do to keep us safe. And so that energy is still maybe locked in the nervous system and hasn't been completed, that behavior movement.
Lauren talks to me that sometimes she feels like I'm like tracking her, like sometimes because I'm noticing like I guess it's just the way I'm just looking at her or something, because I'm not like reporting all the time on things I notice. But I do think it's a high skill of mine. But even someone like me who's really tracking a lot and noticing a lot of flags in the body, it's a part of my coaching practice, it's a part of my SE practice. When I talk to Cathy, I'm still doing all kinds of stuff I'm not aware I'm doing. And she's constantly like, hey, did you know you just did this? I'm like, no. And so there is really something fascinating to me about how brilliant our bodies are, how our bodies know exactly what the next thing to do is. Like, I just think that just the way consciousness, I think, is inviting us into healing and wholeness, I think the body is too. And we've just sort of socialized ourselves out of listening and paying attention. And that just developing a deep practice of more communion with the body, more embodiment, more listening, and practices for how to make sense and understand, what's either being communicated or needs some space or wants to get felt, whatever it is. It's pretty life-changing,
And I would say it's an ongoing journey, probably for everyone. I mean, I still get sessions when I need them. I'm, responding in ways I may not be conscious of. So it's helpful for me to have someone witnessing my responses and what my body's doing. And all of us have social and family conditioning that has us override our body. In our culture, there's a whole bunch of the rugged individual and no pain, no gain. And so we may override what our body wants in terms of rest or a need to say no or things like that. And so when we override the body, it can accumulate in our system.
Yeah, like sometimes when I'm doing like introductory chats with people that are interested in getting some somatic experiencing, I'm like, even just us being on this call, like we need to sit up straight and look at each other and like not burp and not fart. And like, we just have so many things. Like we might have all these impulses that we just completely shut down on a regular basis. And like life at large is like this. We have so many ideas, either from society or family of origin or from our ego of just like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And so we really shut down so much stuff. So it's really liberating, I think, to like let ourselves have the experience that we're having. And it seems like that's really a part of the healing. Like that's a part of why I think this work's effective.
I was going to say, go
ahead, Lauren.
I want to share like an anecdote that's even more powerful to me now about my first somatic therapy session, because Kate, I worked with her for like at least a year, maybe longer. And like we would come in and I've had a lot of talk therapy. So I'm like excited, like I'm full of all, I can't wait to like unload on this person. And she's like, sit down and just feel. We're just gonna land here. And that might have been for like, it felt like at the time, the nervous system that I was working with, that felt like eternity. And all the discomfort of just that practice. I was like, and now what's so interesting is like, my nervous system moves so much more slowly in general. So when I think back to that, it's such a contrast to me of like how fast and how vigilant and how, things were moving. But that's something I really appreciate about. And like she really didn't want me to talk much at all. Like that was not, when I would really go into it, she'd find some way to redirect me to like, let's just go through the sensations. So just a little anecdote for people listening, but also to reinforce all the things that you're saying about how intelligent the body is and like the rugged individualism and all the overrides. Like it's unbelievable to me now. And I still feel like I could do this for the rest of my life and not be fully attuned to everything my body's saying. But the contrast, even that would have been probably like 5 or 6 years ago to now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, Cathy's slowing me down all the time. I like to talk. But yes, that is a big part of the practice is much less talking, much more experiencing. Hence the name.
Yeah. And so I'll often say to people, including Bethany, but to clients, I'll say, okay, let's take a pause here. And people say, wait, you're interrupting me. I just want to tell you what else happened. And it's like, okay, I want to hear what happens. And it seems like there's a lot happening in your body right now. So let's give your body some time and space and support.
Mm-hmm. I just straight up tell people I will be interrupting them a lot. To just expect that.
Yeah.
Well, Cathy, can you talk a little bit about maybe your professional journey and have you always done somatic therapy? Were you led to it? Just anything around how you arrived at what you're doing now?
Oh, so
I feel like that's a multi-chapter book, actually. She's
right.
always
I was like, how far back do you want me to go? I mean, my first, professional incarnation, I was a city planner in Florida, but that was out of college. I got really, I was a city planner. That was really boring. There was a lot of politics. It wasn't like studying it in college where it's more, what's the ideal scenario? There was all this politics and people making deals with developers and what was going to happen. So, so then I went back to school and became a teacher because I always liked teaching. When I was in college, undergraduate, I was a tutor for a fourth grade little boy who really couldn't read. And so I taught him to read really pretty well in a year. And I got so excited about that because I think reading is so empowering. It opens a whole world to people, possibilities of what they can do and who they can be. And so I became a reading teacher and I worked in high schools, vocational high schools, special ed schools for kids that had gotten thrown out of their public schools. And I taught reading and English and history and field trips. At one school, we'd go on field trips every Friday because the kids couldn't make it through 5 days of classes and we couldn't make it through 5 days teaching them. So, and so when I was teaching, I realized, these kids, I met the parents at parents visiting, and I'd say, and when I'd meet the parents, I'd go, oh my gosh, these kids don't have a chance meeting the parents. It's like, there's so much happening in these kids' family of origin. It's so much addiction or violence or neglect, or, they're coming to school, they haven't had any food or they're whatever. I mean, all those things that I decided I want to help people psychologically, emotionally, because just teaching them something like a skill like reading or writing, which is empowering, didn't get to a lot of the core things that happen before you even get into the classroom. Mm-hmm. So I became a clinical social worker and I worked in some different clinics. I worked in a clinic in Revere and went out in Marlborough. And then I went into independent practice. And then I also went on my own health journey. I got really sick. I lived in a house that had chemicals that were used to treat termites that made me really sick. And so I had to go through a whole bunch of, which still is a process that I go on with because our environment is really challenging chemically. There's a lot in the world that's getting more and more toxic. So I started going into alternative ways of healing just for myself and what would be helpful. And let's see. Oh, I know. I was living in Boulder, Colorado at the time, and I met someone. I met this woman in Italy who lived in Denver, and she was a psychotherapist. And we met at this alternative community called Dom and Her, which is a sort of out-of-the-box alternative community in outside Turin, Italy. And we spent 3 days together touring this community. And she said, I teach something called somatic experiencing. You want to come to an introductory weekend? Because at that point I was doing individual psychotherapy. I forgot. I also along the way, I'll come back to that, became an energy healer. So I'll come back to that.
Yeah, no, she's like a world-class level energy person too. So that's just like woven in, but yeah.
I took her training and her name's Diane Poole Heller, and she's part of the original faculty of somatic experiencing with Peter Levine. She helped write the original manual for the trainings, and she's developed her own training that has to do with people's attachment styles. And it's called the DARE program, Dynamic Attachment Repatterning Experience.
And this is like big deal stuff. Like if you know about attachment, you probably know about Diane Poole-Heller. Like I'm sure Paul over the years has given me so many of her like recorded trainings for Sounds True and all kinds of stuff. She's kind of a big deal in that space.
She is. She has a huge following. She has amazing trainings. She's a great practitioner, and she brings her own spiritual practice in, and her psychological and the somatic experience and the attachment. So she's got a great program. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I took her introductory program, and it was just a weekend. There were like 5 of us because she was adding us to an existing class that she was starting. And I had all these experiences, even though I had already done all this talk therapy for years. And it was like, oh, this is like the missing piece of talk therapy. This is the part that helps the body say, me, I'm here, I'm here. So I took the training. It's a 3-year training. Bethany, you've taken, I don't know if you completed it now. You're an SEP.
Yeah, SEP. I have like a couple. Yeah, thank you. And I'm doing the Eye of the Needle stuff this summer.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's great. That has to do with near-death experiences, whether it's in medical settings or in out in life settings, things like that. Yeah. So that's how I got to here. And along the way, let's see. Oh, I know. I went into energy healing. I went to the Barbara Brennan School of Healing, which is an international school. Barbara Brennan just passed away last year. She was 83, but she had been retired for about 10, 15 years. And she had a 4-year school that when I took it, it was in New Jersey at an old Playboy mansion. No, old Playboy hotel. It had been a hotel.
Fascinating.
It had brown shag carpeting on the walls, not on the floor, but on the walls of the rooms that hadn't been refurbished. Yeah, Barbara said it took a lot to clear the hotel energetically to be able to. So when I went to that school, there were 750 students and 100 teachers from all over the world, and it was more intense. I have 2 masters, one in clinical social work and one in education, and that was by far much more intense than either of those degrees.
Yeah.
Do
you think part of that is because, I mean, the thing that's so different about learning somatic experiencing in the 3-year program is you're lending your nervous system, like you kind of have to do the work to know how to be with other people in the work. So it's a lot of personal practice, which it's the same with like learning context coaching. It's like you're doing your work. So it's not just learning a thing, like you're actually using it for yourself and experiencing a lot of the model too. Is that part of why do you imagine that's part of why Barbara Brennan's school felt intense, or is it something different?
You're definitely on your own journey there. I mean, everyone's doing their own journey. And I mean, the school has, each year there's a different level of intensity. And one year is a real focus on past lives and how do you connect with that. And there's a whole a year journey of connecting to the collective unconscious and connecting to the divine. And so it's very expansive and it's also very internal. It works both very deep inner and very deep outer. So it definitely changed my life.
Well, even just hearing you say that right now, and it probably has something to do with where I'm at, which is like kind of burnt out and like in a transition moment, but connecting to the collective unconscious. I'm like, oh God, like how do they teach energetic boundaries? Like I'm sure that's a part of what it all is, but that sounds terrifying and overwhelming to me right now, actually. Like, one person's nervous system is enough to connect with. So how savvy were they back then, at least, about energetic boundaries? Because I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's not. I sometimes I'm still really developing boundaries in that same way, because sometimes if I'm really attuned to someone, I'm feeling what they feel in their body, maybe instead of them sometimes. And I know from working with you that a lot of times you're like, hey, do you feel anything here? And I'm like, oh yeah, but I know that you're tracking some of that. So, I mean, it applies with collective healing, which is like what we talk about in this podcast. It applies with energy work and it applies with somatics. Like what are the most practical tools for how to have good energetic boundaries with people? Like, what do you use that prevents you from getting totally overwhelmed or something like that, especially if you're tapping into the whole collective?
Well, that's like a huge topic, and I think it's a great topic. I'll give you my immediate. I'm like, all these things are binging off of me as you're asking that. So in my opinion and in my experience, I would say, and the school I went to the school from 1996 to 2000, so it's still ongoing. And I actually got trained to offer the weekend introductory trainings, which I actually don't do, but I wanted to take the training for it. They do teach about boundaries and energetic boundaries for sure. And even in somatic experiencing, we talk about joining with the client rather than merging. So merging is when your energy fields come together and you're into each other's field, like you're sort of overlapping. And joining is when you're with somebody, but you're not overlapped into their fields. So, you would merge with someone if you have a lover and you're like making love, or you're feeling something really close and intimate, you may be merging there, like the souls may have a merging experience. And you might have that maybe with your children a little bit, but you don't really want to have merging ideally with your clients, because it makes it hard to sort of track what's happening and not get influenced. I mean, there are times when we're going to have that experience a little bit with someone. If someone has something very deep that we've also experienced, when they're sharing it, we may feel that. And so we may feel that overlap some, but we just want to be able to track that and not become enmeshed with the client.
And would you like feeling someone else, like being able to sense or imagine, or if your own body has a sensation that, and then like that doesn't track for you with what's happening for you. So you ask, well, is that something that tracks for you over there? Or do you notice some tightness here or something? Would you say that's merging or not necessarily?
So in somatic experiencing, we talk about being in the resonant field with someone, that there's an energy that our body, we're electromagnetic beings. We generate a field, sometimes called an aura, around ourselves. And so we're going to feel that even through, technology. It's like you can see, people say, how much can happen online in a session? And I say,
all of it.
I say it's like 85% of being in person. I think that being in person has some things like you can't do physical touch.
Right, like containment or something.
Yeah, and you can't do things that like with boundaries or distancing in quite the same way. Mm-hmm. But a lot can happen. A lot of healing can happen. Mm-hmm. So in the resonance with somatic experiencing and also with energy work, you're going to feel the implications. It's like if you walk into a situation and people have been fighting, you might feel the energy of the tension in the room, or if you walk in and people are just feeling in love and there's a softness, there might be resonance. So resonance is going to happen because we're human beings and we feel that, and our nervous system is going to respond to that automatically. And it can be a tool that can be really helpful working with clients. Mm-hmm. And even with ourselves to say, oh, I'm just feeling, resonance happens even if we go to the movies or watch TV. When we cry in a movie, it's like there's resonance, right? Because we're getting connected and feeling something with the story and the actors and things. So it can be really helpful, but you want to be able to also sort of have a witness aspect as the clinician. You want to be able to sort of hold your seat, as Diane Poole-Heller says, to sort of feel your center. So you're not pulled in and lost who you are centered. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm thinking about it with how we talk about coaching, and there's a concept called looping. So it's like you loop with the client, then you loop with yourself, and then you loop with something that's like a tree or something that's not concerned about what's happening on the call or whatever. And just to kind of keep checking in as a regrounding, probably staying in your seat or coming back to your seat kind of practice, so you can be in the resonance, but also be pretty grounded at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, so sometimes, and in somatic experiencing, we might ask clients to do things like just look around or to wiggle their toes or move their fingers just to get connected in present time and be here. We call it orienting. Like if you were, the analogy I use, if you were a dog and walked into a new room, a dog will look around, check it out, sniff. I mean, we don't as humans sniff so much, but we might, And so orienting helps our nervous system settle. So that's something, if there's like a enmeshment happening between a client and a clinician, you can always say, let's orient, because that helps break and give a larger space, holding space for the interaction. So it doesn't come too enmeshed. So finding your seat, moving your toes can help for the therapist and or the client.
Mm.
So I will, yeah, go ahead.
Just wondering if this is getting at some of what Lauryn was interested in, but I'm wondering if there's more to the story too.
Well, I was just thinking about, the way that I guess it works for me is that, I know it's not necessarily linear, but in a lot of ways, matter was energy first, right? And then it became matter. And wherever your awareness is, some people's awareness, they don't even have the awareness that they are a body at all. Some people's awareness is in multiple different dimensions. Some people's awareness is in the energetic field, the quantum field. And I feel like we have to direct their awareness to a place where we can both exist. And that, I think that the evolution will be that we continue to know ourselves more and more as energy. And that I even think that trauma is evolving us into the direction of knowing ourselves more as energy, and like all the vigilance in our bodies is ultimately making us kind of like able to really track energetically different people and their energy. And so I don't know, I'm just interested in it, in the fact of like, if you don't know yourself as a body, you have to learn the boundaries of a body. And then if you know yourself as energy, you have to respect the boundaries of matter. And all of that is like part of like learning whether or not you're merging or joining or entangled, or it's just like learning where you are in awareness, learning where your own sovereignty is in that awareness, and where you exist and how much agency you have about where your awareness sits in any given moment.
I see Cathy got a little more squinty as you're talking. I'm wondering what you noticed or what you're hearing in that.
Yeah, so I was looking at Lauryn. So so now you're reflecting me of squinting. I wasn't aware of that when I was. So that brings up all sorts of things that came up for me, which I was thinking about also with your question earlier, Bethany, about boundaries, and with the Barbara Brennan School of Healing, because it's really, most of the people who go there, I would say, feel more comfortable. This is a generalization, or when I was there, felt more comfortable out of their body than in their body. And so, and if people have had traumatic backgrounds, childhoods, especially starting from, in utero or birth or early childhood, that people often go to out of body because it's safer in the energetic realms than to be in a body. And that could be because of medical, trauma or car accident or abuse or neglect or whatever, that it's like, okay, being here in my present physical situation is intolerable. So I'm just going to, go to some place that feels better and safer. And that's a really good adaptive strategy. And that's really good. I mean, you can call it dissociation, but you can also call it the intelligence of our psyche. So it helps us from going crazy. And in the Barbara Brennan School, we would definitely go, we'd connect with guides and other dimensions and, other lifetimes and all these type of things. So for me, I was like, oh yeah, okay. You know, and the school was also a big focus on world service. So, let's help heal things on the planet, and be a light worker, which I'm all in favor of things like that. But then we'd have people come and talk to us like, I think it was Bernie Siegel. I don't know if people know him anymore. He's an MD, but also did a lot with healing. And we used to have these lectures, healing and medicine lectures. And he was like, most of the great saints, this is what I remember from his lecture, most of the great saints died of cancer because they're so busy taking on the world and opening up and trying to carry everything that it just sort of burns them out biologically, physically. And Barbara Brennan had a hard time physically too. So, there's that balance of like, okay, we've incarnated from my perspective for a reason. Like we're here and down here and in this physical body for some reason. And I was just talking to my friend the other day who's a healer. And she was like, I think home is the non-physical realm. She said peace and home is there. And then we come down to earth, which is sort of like having to say goodbye to home and endure earth until we get to go back to home. And part of me could yeah, it's definitely a challenge down here a lot of times, is my experience. I mean, they're wonderful things, but they're also, a lot of challenges. You just think about what the world's confronting right now, like the war in Ukraine, the pandemic we've gone through, climate change. There's just so many things that we're trying to hold and respond to globally.
One thing that I want to add to that, I agree with everything you're saying, and totally also about the choice to incarnate. I guess the one thing that I would maybe add or push on a little bit is just that I believe everything in the life principle happens for the highest will of all. And so I'm curious about the way that it was of service, the disassociations that happened and our ability to access those other realms. And now what I see is all this work is people trying to come back. But on the other side of that is this higher evolution of humanity, because we can access these other realms and the power and majesty of these bodies. And then in my personal journey, as my nervous system heals, this is obviously a 3-year kind of study, and I'm very early on. So I'm just kind of testing it. But life is actually so easy and gentle. And so I wonder how much we've made life hard because of getting out of right relationship with our bodies and the earth, right? And, if the universe loves this game of cat and mouse and seeing, knowing itself, it's just the journey to come back to that peace and ease that life always was created to be. And that we would even appreciate it more because now we have the contrast of the world that we created out of right relationship, where suffering and war and all these things are, occurring. So it's really interesting to me to see how different my life experience is as a result of my nervous system being different. And that was not necessarily the case when I was just changing my thoughts, or I worked a 12-step program around addiction. I disciplined myself around that addiction, but my life didn't change. But my body is in a state of trust. It feels 88% of the time, it's moving. It wants to move at this very gentle pace. It wants to experience pleasure. And so then my life is moving slow, and then pleasure's more centered. There's just these things that I'm wow. I don't know that my light body, who's moving faster than the speed of light, could create that without the help of this body, being feel the sensations. Let's move at this pace.
I mean, I completely agree with all that you're saying, Lauren. I mean, I think that there are amazing things on planet Earth. And a lot of those things are really, from my perspective, really simple. I mean, the sunrise or the ocean or walking in the woods or things where we feel the resonance with the energy of the earth. I taught some energy camp for kids, which was really, really fun. One thing I would have them do, and even with clients, I've done this, is to, go out to a tree and take your shoes off and stand barefoot at the base of a tree and just put your hands on the bark of the tree and just slow down and feel the flow of life force through the tree, through your hands, and feel the energy coming up through your feet from the earth. And it's really palpable. And people can feel that. And it's like, oh, we're getting connected with the rhythm of nature. And I think that technology, which is amazing, but also is faster in a lot of ways than our nervous system is designed for. And so if we don't give our nervous system those times of, just standing barefoot in the grass or just floating in the ocean or just walking through a meadow or picking a flower, or being with a flower, or watching the bees, whatever it is, that our body isn't as happy when we don't give our body those really simple pleasures that have a lot to do with being here in this dimension on this amazing planet.
In my gratitude last night, I think it was like this feels like anyone who really, really knows Lauryn, and my sister all the time is like, who are you? Who are you? Who is this person? My favorite thing to do is drive my son to school.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up in the morning and I go down and he's sleeping and I just rub his back, and he's 16, by the way. So he's not 5. And there's just this he more than anyone invites me to this deep presence, because I've talked about this, there's so many moments that I wasn't available for. And now that I am present, and just going through my gratitude list, it was the most simple things, driving him to school. There's this bakery that I love that and I just, it's I spent most of my life chasing a feeling of being alive, I guess, really, right? And being, whether it was being super mission oriented and working in the inner city, or whether it was chasing after deeply romantic connections or whatever they were, it was I wanted this hit of aliveness. And it's the paradox or this irony that I'm experiencing the most pleasure in this simplicity, exactly what you're saying. I literally have 25 plants in my house, and I'm just staring, and I can't even believe it myself. But I want to say that my body taught me this. My body is teaching me those to appreciate those things in a way that a brain dominant experience, I don't think it would be available in the same way.
I completely agree. I mean, what happens from a nervous system perspective, and which our culture reinforces, unfortunately, is that if you're go, 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 then instead of being in what's called parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, which is, smelling the flowers, enjoying the smell of a cup of coffee, or just, looking out at the sunset, that if we're in that fight or flight, I have to get things done, I have to push faster, then our nervous system isn't feeling safe enough and isn't settled enough to really enjoy those things. We we walk right by them and we don't even notice them.
Well, and what's interesting is one of the biggest invitations to me paying attention to the small sensations was also starting to study Tantra, and what we think about as Tantra, it is part of it, but Tantra, being tantric about life, is really being deeply embedded in the sensations of your reality. And really enjoying those and taking those in. So I guess I say that to say that we know that's a very old practice, it's very deep. Or I think about yoga all the time, and I'm I bet when they were teaching yoga, they were just follow whatever your body wants to do and stretch. And then somebody wrote down all these poses because they wanted to teach them to somebody else. But ultimately your body knows, all those poses are pretty natural body poses if you ask your body what it wants to do to stretch. And so I don't know, just something, I guess, settles in me when I'm like, this is like old wisdom, and the bodies have been holding it for us for a very, very long time. And then the invitation right now is like, are you willing to come back in? And then I guess this is where we might could go next. But like what I'm seeing is when the light body or the consciousness starts to come back in, there's a lot of density. There's a lot of pain, I guess. There's a lot of discomfort in the body because they've been out and they haven't been feeling the sensations, or they haven't been aware of how much has built up in the system. And so then there's this resistance to the consciousness coming back in, because it's like, the way that I describe it is like, you abandoned your house for 35 years. If you moved out of your house for 35 years and you came back and you hadn't done anything to it, it was going to need some stuff, but that part and the resilience of the light body and the consciousness to be willing to move through that density, to experience the fullness of what the body is capable of sensation wise, I think I see is like a struggle for people. I don't know how that shows up in y'all's work with your clients.
So I think that what can happen too is the places that we've had to like condense and get dense to protect ourselves in our body or in the energy field around our body. It's like, after a while, it's like you lose consciousness of it, and that protection is there, but it's not conscious so much. And so the work can be about helping those places that have, what did Barbara call those? Frozen time capsule conglomerate, something like that. she had this long, big name for it, right?
That is a long, big name, but it does resonate.
But that, or that, and it can be, events that happen to us, something really can be an emotional event. It doesn't have to even be a physical event, but it impacts our physicality, our nervous system, so that we contract there to protect ourselves. And so the work may be about, where are those places, giving support to those places we sort of went into a contraction that becomes unconscious, and we're sort of frozen there, to bring love and support and kindness and compassion to those places, so that it can feel safe to connect with someone in the outside world, and feel safe to be able to soften and open again. So I'd say that's both the energy work and somatic experiencing. Both do those. I do want to say it felt like, I loved learning about psychological healing, which I got from my social work background. And I love going to the Barbara Brennan because it brought in the spiritual, multidimensional, infinite qualities, which I love that whole expansion. And then somatic experiencing, sort of, so I'm bringing back in, coming this way with my hands, helped me integrate those things, because Barbara Brennan, it's like, we're like, oh, we're in the ethers, we're high, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, but it's like, okay, how do you embody it? So it's not just out there, or a spiritual bypass or something like that. And so how do you integrate it so it comes down and is embodied?
I want to add that a download that I've gotten is like that there's just actually almost a requirement that there has to be a symbolic representation of anything that you do energetically or in the field in third dimensional reality, to like, for the body to fully integrate it. And that's why even like rituals like a funeral or a marriage, or that's why we have those things, is actually to create the symbolism of what really, I guess it doesn't always work this way, but it's like a symbolism of something that's happened in consciousness that you want to bring into third dimensional reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think ceremony is a great way of integrating, ritual ceremony of bringing in things that are concepts and inspirations and universal types of archetypes, or the divine, or things, and helping it come down and come through, so we can embody it through physical ritual, through music, through drumming, through dance, through intention that helps our body and our soul take it in, to bring it in on our soul as well. One person I studied with for quite a while after the Barbara Brennan School, would talk about having a foot in both worlds, in the spiritual realm and in the physically incarnated realm, that to be equally balanced in both, and that you want to be careful of not trying to heal the whole world, which I've mentioned to Bethany recently, just a little, what he called the Bodhisattva vow, which is, world service, which is a wonderful thing, and which I got from Barbara Brennan a lot, and different religious traditions have about service. But that, how do you balance world service with your own health and embodiment and going slow and enjoying, something simple here? Because otherwise you can get burnt out if you're like on a mission, whatever that is, and you're not connected with, okay, and what does my body need right now? And what's it like just to slow down and do something really simple?
There's like a lot that's been happening in my life and in my extended family and stuff lately. And one of the images I got, I don't actually remember if it was on a session with you, Cathy, or kind of in my own practice, but was like a swimming pool. Like you can't just, like, if half of the swimming pool is the collective and other people and half of the swimming pool is you, like you can't fill one half only. Like it doesn't work. Like you can't only fill the half that's about helping everybody and healing everybody in the collective. Like I guess I'm feeling the truth more of that, like you can't even do that if you don't resource yourself. And even these like simple ideas we have around, like you put your own oxygen mask on first in the plane, and it's just like, and I imagine that the more I fill myself up, the deeper the pool can be for serving other people too. And so the balance, I suppose, is the key there. So similar to what you're saying about a foot in each realm, it's like a foot in the balance of self-support and integration and supporting other people's and and their integration. It was a pretty powerful moment in one of our sessions where you talked about this idea that like some people take on this vow, and it's like, I think I know a lot of these people. Like a lot of the people I hang out with are like, okay, let's heal the collective, let's do the thing, like let's reduce suffering, let's whatever, get more embodied, like all these things. And then you talked about laying down that vow and like what comes after that, and even talked about like, I think it was a few different stages of like how we relate to ourselves and other people. How do you describe that? And I know that you've moved out of practicing as much as you were, and you're really tending to, I think, support people that are supporting others, I guess, doing healing work with the healer. So you're really focused on that part of the pool, maybe to help the other part go up. Where do you see yourself in that process, in those stages? Do you still feel like that's a part of your vow and part of your contract maybe, or is it different now?
So first I want to go back to, I love that metaphor of the pool. I think that's really clever. I think that's a great metaphor. And
I've been using it. I've been talking about it with clients.
And, so what happened to me after I graduated from the Barbara Brennan School in 2000 is I was like, okay, world service. I'm going to, heal the world. I'm going to do all this wonderful stuff. And I was sort of like high from the school and from all these. And so I went to like, I'm going to go to the worst places on the planet and help heal. So I went to Auschwitz and I went to Dachau and I went to Hiroshima, and I went, and I went and did all these prayers and ceremony and did all these things. And I got really burnt out. I mean,
yeah, no shit. Oh my God. Did you just do that on your own? Were you with other people? What were you doing? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I did. Well, let's see. Well, I went to Hiroshima because I had a Japanese roommate. So Barbara Brennan had said the darkest place. Oh, well, I went to, I went to Auschwitz first, I guess. I went to Auschwitz with a German classmate of mine from the Barbara Brennan School, and a couple other people met us when we went to, there was another concentration. One of the teachers who was German met my classmate and I there. And I remember Barbara Brennan saying Auschwitz was the darkest place on the planet that she had been to energetically. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go there. I'm going to call on the divine and all my healer friends and, collectively go there and bring all this, and one of the teachers that Barbara Brennan had studied with the Dalai Lama, and she had this sacred ceremonial sand that comes from a Buddhist ceremony called the Kala Chakra ceremony, which is for world peace, that's done with the Dalai Lama. And they create these sand mandalas that are beautiful with multicolored sand, and they do all these prayers while they're making them. And then they sweep the sand up and they pour it into some body of water. So the water can carry the vibrations of healing from the sand and the prayers. So she had a little bit of sand from one of these Kali Chakra ceremonies that she gave to me. And so I took it with me to Auschwitz. And I had a whole bunch of people that were energetically connecting with me and sending prayers, different teachers and people from Barbara Brennan that I knew.
It's like Avengers for healers. I'm like thinking about costumes for y'all.
No, that's really, I love that. I mean, it sort of felt like that. Like I was definitely on a mission like that. Yeah. I mean, and I was in my new age costume, right? So, and so my German classmate and I went, and and it was really, it was hard being in Auschwitz, but she had being German, it hit her in a whole different way than it hit me. I mean, I actually, from my experience, feel like I died there and had a lot of experience in a past life there. So I was going there. It felt like I had family connections to people who had died there and things and stuff. So it was sort of like a soul retrieval for me in a certain way, and a healing from other lifetime dimensions.
Was it like more healing on the whole, or more overwhelming or dysregulating, or do you feel like you did what you went to do, like that you did the thing that you went there to do?
It felt like I was sort of on a soul mission, it was sort of like it felt like I was going there to do some type of completion that didn't feel complete. And so I went with my classmate, and, she was just devastated by being there because of German. So it felt different to her. And I was going there as feeling like more that someone, not as a German, well, I was German in this past life, but of someone who died there. So it was a different thing for me than for her. And there just happened to be that there was this amazing river that was really close to Auschwitz, which I had no idea about when we went, that we drove across this bridge when we went. And so after, we were there for like the afternoon, or I was there, she was actually waiting for me back in the parking lot because it was just too much for her. And I just felt like I had to walk around and sort of just go, it's sort of like going back to the scene of an accident afterwards to help you just process it in a way. So I did that. And then we went to this river, and it turned out like, there was a path. And so I said to her, come, this is going to be the healing part. This is the best part. We're going to do the ceremony with the sand from the Dalai Lama, and we're going to, do this cleansing and do all these things. And I was wearing this kata. It's a white cotton silk, white little scarf that gets blessed by the Dalai Lama that he gives to people, that my teacher had given me that along with the sand. So I put that on, and I had the sand and some other sort of sacred objects. And she was like, no, I just have to stay here. So she stayed with the car. And so I just walked out to the river, and there were like 13 white swans on the river. Just like, it was like unbelievable. It was just like, okay, like a message from God, from the divine. It was like, okay, here. And I was like, oh my God, okay, here's the place, And so I just did a, prayer and blessings, and sprinkled the sand in the water. And so it just felt like a cleansing for everybody, for the people who were the prisoners in Auschwitz, for the people who were the guards, it was like for everybody. It doesn't matter which part you were playing in that story.
What I'm struck by too is like like it wasn't like often we think of this mission energy as like push, right? Like being in the trenches, in some ways that particular ceremony, it was just you being yourself in some ways, and bringing your light, not necessarily even having another human with you in that moment. And one way that I have been, I think there's actually people in my life who have aversions to how mission driven that I've been in my life. And I would say the most fundamental like truth, like everything else in my life could be crumbling, but I was like on this mission, and that mission was like there's like a warrior energy, like really strong. And when I went to Costa Rica like a month ago, and I got a massage, and I heard this message, like, we're taking the warrior off, like in the massage, like taking the armor or taking like that avatar off. And then I did like a personal journey, and it was around like really releasing the vigilance of like, I've got to do something. I've got to. And so I'm saying all this to say that since that time I had an experience last week where I work in like race, across lines of race. And I just had this experience, and it was so gentle, and I was so myself, but the impact was the same, if not greater, than the energy of like, I got to go and I got to do and and it was just like my presence was enough. And my presence brought who I am and what I have to offer. So that's how I was like relating to that moment of it was really beautiful when I imagine you in the white, and I could see the sand, and I could see the swans, and see you in that river. And what would be such a private, simple moment. I think what most of us who are really connected believe actually 100% could create healing for all of those that you mentioned, the guards and the people who died, just the same way when we heal just small things in our body, like generational healing is occurring. And it actually can be so simple and be so much around you just being, each of us being who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I don't have that same urgency and that same save the world. I mean, it's still sometimes painful for me to see what's happening in the world. And now I feel like, okay, I can help and do my mission in smaller, gentler ways. And so that I don't have to be jetting around the world to all these places. And, I'm not sorry I did them. I mean, they were profound experiences, and I'm glad I did them. But I think after doing those things and then sort of getting burnt out physically and emotionally, and you can download more energy than your physical nervous system is designed to actually accommodate. It's like, you can blow a fuse in your house if you put in too many appliances or too big. So our physicality has limits, as a physical human being. And so I think that when I started doing the somatic experiencing, it was like, oh, okay, it's okay to take care of this physical container and to honor it and not have to feel like I have to save the world. Mm-hmm. That where's the balance that I don't,
She's not
what I'm adding is like, what if you're actually saving? I mean, we don't know, right? But what if you're actually saving the world more by centering that? And that's kind of what I'm playing with.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to look dramatic and big and headlines. It can be gentle and small and seemingly small, but can ripple out in lots of ways.
And I just want to stamp for the record that Cathy said working with me is gentle and easeful and not overwhelming and not hard and doesn't require a hero persona. Because I think that's what I heard you say. I can do this in much smaller ways that are friendlier to your system. And I receive the benefit of that. It's very powerful to be able to have you supporting me and helping me.
I'm glad. And sometimes those ways we affect people we don't even know until, maybe years later or maybe never. I mean, I actually had someone contact me last year who, when I taught at the school in Westwood, Massachusetts, this little school of 20 students and 5 teachers for kids that had gotten thrown out of their public school system. And she tracked me down. I guess she remembered my name. And she was calling, she's saying, "You were my teacher in 10th grade. And I just want to thank you for trusting me." And she had graduated from our little alternative school. And we had given her a copy of The Little Prince. No, not The Little Prince. Sorry, The Velveteen Rabbit, and of being loved. And she sent me a screenshot of what I'd written to her in the inside of the book. And she goes, "No, you all really made a big impact on my life. And I've had a really good life and happy life since then. So I want to, I just want to thank you."
Oh. I'm sure there's so many moments like
Well,
that.
I think about how many people you've touched by healing Bethany. Like coaching Bethany, right? And like if it's not just her kids, but like, my sense is you were like the inspiration for a lot of the work that she chose to do. And so that's really beautiful too, right? It's just that ripple. Like if we could all see that ripple, like, if we could all visually see it, we might not feel the need to kill ourselves, and work crazy hours or do whatever the things are, because we would understand, like, and I think for me, one of the big humbling things was me recognizing, like, there's been a couple times in my life where the message is like, what does it matter if you have supported the healing of all these kids on the West Side or all these white bodies around race, if you're not in right relationship with your own family, if your kid is suffering because he doesn't experience you as a present parent, like there are some things for me that I had to like reorient my values and my focus, because that mission orientation was like not just at the expense of my body, but the people that in my life I feel, the most responsible to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I needed the world to not stop me. I mean, I've been in different iterations of this over the years, but like just lately, I've just pulled way back off work, and I'm just pouring more energy into just myself and the kids, and simple stuff like having time to cook dinner and stuff like that, and not ordering out. And I think I maybe needed a push, because like I kind of had all the different areas of life explode a little bit at the same time to really like get it all the way of like, you can't do it all, babe. You actually can't. Like I'm integrating, I can't, because I always wanted to believe like I can do more. I can, whatever. And so I think it's surprising how good it feels to lay some of that down and slow down. And maybe sometimes it feels good. Mostly it's just like I don't even feel like I have a choice about it right now. It's just like you're not going to do all that right now. So
yeah, I feel like that's when the body the body gets maybe a couple of times in life that it gets an override button, and it's like override.
Shuts it down. Like, nope, you're not doing it.
So somatic experiencing likes to define trauma as too much, too fast, without support. So the nervous system goes into overwhelm, and maybe even beyond that into shutdown. And so, what we do is we give, instead of too much, too fast, without support, we go slower, we give more space, we give support, so that the nervous system can go, oh, okay, it is possible to let this move through. I'm not all alone. And I think that's true, whether it's spiritual trauma or emotional or physical. I don't think it matters which dimension of our being. I think we're, as Diane Poole-Heller likes to say, we're herd animals. We're not designed to have to do it by ourselves. And I think that message isn't always available so much nowadays. I think people feel like they have to push and do, our culture wants productivity and push and do it and be independent and you can do this. And I don't think that's really how we're designed. So, so somatic experiencing was very helpful because it helped me say, oh, it's important to have certain boundaries, like tangible boundaries, and taking care of this body that I sort of didn't have a context or connection with after the Barbara Brennan school. I was like in the out into the expanded state. Barbara Brennan, though, did used to say often that we sort of go through experiences where there's an expansion and we go out, but then we need to be able to take that experience that expanded us and be able to bring it back in to integrate it. And she talked about you can have a positive contraction. She called this a contraction of bringing it in and integrate. You can have a positive contraction, meaning you build it in and allow for it, or you can have a negative contraction where you have it by default because you haven't honored what your system needs, and then your body overrides and says, okay, I'm just, I'm stepping in now. Yeah.
Yep, learning about that. Effective.
Yeah, and I think we all go through those trial. I mean, I think we go back and forth and learn from those, myself included. We like, okay, too much,
Yeah, well, like so much in the professional coaching world, corporate coaching is about like KPIs and results and how do you get better outcomes.
What's a KPI?
Key performance indicators. Yeah, a bunch of ridiculous jargon about how to be more productive or how to hack things so you can get, it's like I'm getting right now, there's so many people that are so far beyond their capacity and so burnt out and trying to create from that place. And I feel like I'm learning about, because I'm creating something a little bit new too. And I think I'm understanding like what are the conditions that one needs when they've been under-resourced for a while so that you actually can maybe do your soul's mission and do what you came here to do and do your calling in a way that's actually like fully supported. Which I don't think I was totally tuning into that before when I was thinking about like the work that I do in organizations. And so it's just like another layer, and you can't bring anybody anywhere you haven't been. So I also am just like, okay, great. Like I'm just really learning about what this is like. I think there's so many people out there that are in this place also and have no idea what to do with that or what kind of support to seek out. And so even seeing what I'm available for from this place, which is like, Cathy calls it collapse. I'm mostly in collapse right now, but like what is possible and what is support, like what helps and what am I noticing? Like I'm just paying a lot of attention too about like what happens for one when they're in this place, because I think a lot of people are there or they get there eventually. That's where they're heading. So it's just
I just want to add like collapse to this collapse conversation that right now what I see is that there isn't like an infrastructure to support people when they hit that place, and the consequences to their life are so big generally, unless there's like a significant amount of privilege, available to like hold them and like resources. And I think it's also one of the reasons that at least the populations that I'm more connected to might continue to override is like, because everything in my livelihood depends on my ability to push my productivity to its edges, and I just think about like, when I went through this with like Heman and stuff, like, and I even talked about it with you, like there are some laws like disability, the Family Disability Act, there are some like ways to protect your job, but not your income. Yeah. If you need a break, if you need to stop.
And I think what you're talking about, Lauren, speaks to why we have such a huge homeless population now. I mean, a lot of it's people with mental health challenges, but I think it's just a lot of, or the addiction. It's like, what are people trying to cope with that's too much, that they want to sort of numb something out with a drug just to help them get through the day because they're not feeling supported by family or the culture or, even traditional things we used to have. Like, I'm not saying you have to be religious, but churches or groups or community. We're all on this technology. We're all on this, it's, I don't think that's how we're supposed to be.
And just progressivism and like modernity and, that like, you can use the same tools to kind of like have an easier time and suffer less by being completely driven by your ego without real care and concern for other people, or you can use those very same tools at in a totally different way. And so it's just like it's like a capitalism deal. And it's just like there's all these expectations of like you don't even get health insurance unless you have a job. Not exactly, but it's just like it keeps everybody working. Like it just keeps
like, and then and then you get a mortgage because that's what you're supposed to do, but you can't pay your mortgage if you don't. A salary is more likely to help you pay your mortgage, and the whole system. I think it just goes to say like whatever the core values of a culture are, like everything else is going to line up to that. And right now, the core values of our culture are not have the healthiest nervous system and relationships that you can have and joy and be present to your life, right? It's
Cathy, what do you think are like, because a lot of what the conditions for healing are, like you said, is being witnessed, just being with somebody and whatever's happening. Like, if you were to say, this thing or this practice or the ability to do this makes the biggest impact for someone's body to be able to catch up, for that other half of the pool to get filled, to be able to actually process and integrate, what do you think those things are?
I think they're really like gentle little things. I mean, I think it's a lot of it has to do with seeing people in person, I think, actually, whether it's a hug or going for a walk with someone, or just because there's an interaction that happens, that there's something here that the three of us are meeting, but it's not the same as when like I can get a physical hug from someone. Or, if you're patting your dog or your cat sitting in your lap, and you can feel there's like a commingling of life energy that gets exchanged. That's really nourishing and nurturing, that I think we need. Or it's like, buying a bouquet of flowers or something like that. That's things that have life force energy in them.
I'm thinking about when I had RSV, before we started the recording, some folks are feeling a little under the weather. And I was talking about how I had RSV pretty bad a few months ago. And I had this like super high fever for 5 days. I was like, it was bad. And Lauryn came over and I was like, you might get sick. And she's like, I'm a witch. And she just like came over anyways and like put me back together, mostly including like holding me, like lay down in my bed next to me and hugged me and like rubbed my feet and like saged the room and put a little altar in the room. And like, I swear it was like after that, something settled and I started getting better. Like I wasn't getting worse anymore. And I could feel it. I was like, oh, that as a person came here and touched me and held me. And now I don't have a fever anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I really do think that's true. And
that's what's crazy about COVID and then I mean, I get it. It's real. We'll catch it, but the irony that you have to be more isolated than ever.
Yeah.
When it's like the worst, what has been one of the worst case scenarios. Like,
well, maybe go ahead, Cathy.
I was just saying, and there's like record anxiety in the world now. People are trying to find therapists and mental health support because I think of all the anxiety that's been created, a lot having to do with that isolation that we had, that we were just trying to survive. It wasn't like, we were doing something to be bad. It was just, that seemed like the best choice to make so that people wouldn't get very sick or die. So, but I think we were in survival mode a lot, even if we didn't have COVID, the energy of, will we get sick? Will somebody die?
Well, a year plus ago, I don't remember how long ago, but we had Jim Bethmer, who's like one of our teachers and coaches, on the podcast, and we asked, like, what do you think the lasting effects of the pandemic are? And he was like, touch, like even little kids and like not being on the playground, not being able to touch each other. And he's like, I just think when this thing's over, we're gonna just have like places that you just go get cuddled. Like that's the thing. Not yoga, like you just go touch people and be held in really safe ways. And I'm kind of creating that because I had this insane mold problem in my house and I had to totally redo a whole floor of the home. And now I'm pretty much turning it, we're going to call it Healing House Studio, but it's going to be workshops and stuff, but it's also going to be like, all right, just come here and have a cuddle puddle and like drink tea with people and go in the hot tub if you want, like, and be around people in real life, like on a, like regular hours, open house, like in our community. And I just feel super drawn around it. I don't even know if I had the whole sense of why I was super drawn around it. I'm kind of justifying it and explaining it to myself now, but I'm just like, people here together, touching, sharing, learning how to, like teaching each other all of our skills, and then just being physically present. That feels like a really important thing that wants to happen.
Sometimes people ask me, like, what do I miss most from the Barbara Brennan School? And I would say the community. I learned all these skills and got all this information and blah, 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 but really just being together. And it's not like I was best friends with everybody there, but it was just that sense of communion. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to have you at.
We kind of usually end the podcast with like how to heal the collective, and I'm ending it believing it's through cuddling. And we had to keep it simple. On that same podcast, Jim, remember he said like he felt like 90% of his healing was just from like maybe sleeping next to his wife, and how, like, because they're very affectionate to each other, and how important that's been. Like, and he said it might have been more impactful than, and he's someone who studied and done a lot of healing work. It might have been the most impactful thing that I did.
Yep. I could speak to the efficacy of it.
I'll say pets help too. Like if
I
there
was going to say, yes, I was
humans
thinking
around.
That's why so many people adopted cats and dogs during the, just to have someone to hold and pat and feel them purr, or to breathe, feel that warmth.
Co-regulate.
Oh yes, co-regulate with your pet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all your stories on the pod and telling us about all these things. I was just like, yeah, I feel like Lauryn and Cathy are gonna hit it off. I think they're gonna have a lot of similar ideas about stuff, but I feel so lucky that you two are my main two people that are gonna like helping me and supporting me and being with me on my journey.
So we have something we've done sometimes, maybe Bethany, they did it at your SE training, where you just put your hands like this into the screen and just connect with each other. If you like that idea.
Yeah.
And just send some sweet love and compassion.
It's like a lot of sensation, actually.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's a fun way to end.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It felt good. I got a little tingly, so that was nice.
Gotta love a little tingle.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much. It was lovely to be here with you both.
Me too. We'll see you.
And thank you for everything you bring to your community in terms of support and information and inspiration. Yeah.
Thank you. We're grateful that they listen.
Sometimes us talking to us in the future.
Right. It's really helpful to us. So when it's helpful to other people, that is a
bonus. All right, y'all. I'll see you next
time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We welcome your feedback. You can email us at healingcollectivepod@gmail.com. Our website is thehealingcollectivepodcast.com, at Healing Podcast on Twitter, at Healing Collective Podcast on Instagram. Special thanks to Ethan Luck, who produces. You can find him at Ethan Luck on all platforms.